but it was before his. So, all right, so we'll get started tonight. We may have others join us, but we're going to get going since it's 7 o'clock. I know my lessons tend to go long, and this is a really good one. This is one that I really love. So I'll move some. Here's some pillows, and there and over there too, Abby. Oh, okay. Well, I was gonna. Yeah, there's room to sit here and over there too, Abby. So okay, all right. So we talked last week at the end of our class, and since we've been recording all of these, I'm not going to worry too much about going back and reviewing. You know, just a couple of basic principles of the way that we're approaching the book, and that is that we have three main characters. The women in the court are certainly part of the conversation. And hopefully, the ones of you who are joining in have been able to get the color text to help us identify who is speaking and when. But last week we ended with this wonderful invitation and thoughts about how wonderful it is to have this one that this shepherd loves, that she's like a garden, that she's like a garden of refreshment that others can't necessarily enter into, that she is that she has all the wonders of a garden, and that there are many privileges that come with being able to have that type of relationship with her. And he's described her and talked about her in very tender ways, as if those were the special that those were the special things that they shared, that he would be one that could come into the garden. And so we begin our text tonight where we left off, and that is verse 16 of chapter 4. And I believe this is her speaking when she says, "Awake, O north wind, and come, O south, blow upon my garden, that its spices may flow out. Let my beloved come to his garden and eat its pleasant fruits." And so she answers by expressing her constant desire and her constant hope, her desire to be a blessing to him and for him to be a blessing to her. And she says, you know, let the winds blow. Let the north wind blow, the one that comes in, this air that's chilled from the snow-clad mountains that comes in from the north. Let it blow. It's frigid and frosty winds, and let it come. And it will serve her purpose. Even that chilly wind, you know, is going to waft its way laden with the fragrance and the compensation from her goodness. Or let the south wind blow, she says. Let the south wind come. The sleepy airs, the south wind that's apt to wrap around us and bring us, you know, this lazy warmth and this carelessness. And let it come. And that wind too will be useful to her. It doesn't matter. Let the winds blow, and the garden is still a useful thing. And in addition to those around her in the garden who will benefit from her loveliness, she will benefit those who the winds blow her goodness out to. She will be the greatest blessing, of course, for the one who comes in, but in the sense that her garden is so wonderfully filled, she will be a blessing to all who know her. And that the winds even serve her purpose, that even the trials and tribulations that come to her, even the storms that may come into her life and in and out of her life, others benefit from the way that she deals with those things. Her most diligent desire is to be a blessing to her beloved, though. You tell me I'm a garden, and I say to you that I'm yours. Let my beloved come in and own me. Let him come soon, make him my own, and fulfill all of my hopes and his. She promises to be his and his alone, and all that she had would be given to him, body and soul. She will be loyal, true, faithful, serving. We sing, I am thine, O Lord. I have heard thy voice, and it told thy love to me, but I long to rise in the arms of faith and be closer drawn to thee. And these are the sentiments that are coming out of this garden. And then in verse 5, in chapter 5 of verse 1, well, these are the things that were talked about. This constant desire to be a blessing, that even the winds will carry her fragrances abroad, and that she is his garden. And he does plan to have her as his own. There's a great hope and anticipation for this intimate relationship that they will share throughout the remainder of their lives. And they're preparing for such a time. Chapter 5 begins with, I believe, words that are actually, I guess we're not there yet. Hang on. I come to my garden, my sister, my spouse. I have gathered my myrrh and my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk my wine with my milk. Eat, O friends, drink. Yes, drink deeply, O beloved ones. So this division, and what I was going to say a minute ago, and I thought I had the verses on the screen, but I don't. So there is a division here, but this is not a great chapter divide. I believe this is part of the conversation, that she is remembering the things that he said in the past, or he has sent messages to her. And she remember when Esther was kept deep within she was in the chambers of the concubines. And we know that because we know she was with the eunuchs who took care of the concubines, and Mordecai was able to get a message to her. And it could be that this shepherd is giving her this. I think this is actually her talking to the king and the women of the palace and relating to them information and conversations that she's had in the past. He says, I have come to my garden, my sister, my spouse. I have gathered my myrrh and my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk my wine with my milk. Eat, O friends, drink. Yes, drink deeply, O beloved ones. And so it's a shame that the passage is divided the way that it is, because it definitely, I think, goes with the thought process above. The heart of the shepherd was just as hopeful and thrilled with the prospect of rapture of the heart as the Shulamite was. And so let's not make this division take us away from this conversation that they're having with other. He speaks with great anticipation in her suggestion that he will be hers, and all that she has to offer will be his. It's true excitement of proclaiming the closeness of a relationship that will be enjoyed. And we understand this when we yearn for heaven, that we talk about being with God, having this ability to be with the one that we love, understanding that that we will forever have that intimate relationship with our Savior. And obviously, these are the sentiments that are being talked about here. He says, indeed, I am coming. I will have you as my very own, all the heights and depths, all the lengths and breadths of love. And that's the great hope. That's his great expectation of the time to come. There is the hope. They will be together no matter what the world does to interrupt them. That it is that hope, and we've talked a lot about that in the song, that no matter what the world may put in front of us, we long for this time that we will be together. It will be rapture for both of them. They know it. They are already in love, and they are already devoted to one another. And they're devoted to the thought of this time that they will have together. Surely we understand John 14:2-3, which is on the screen as well. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again, and I will receive you unto myself, that where I am, you will be also. And so we see this, and we understand this sentiment that Christ has for us as well, that we are longing to be with him and he with us. And then he speaks about something that maybe perhaps it signifies something even deeper. And that is, he says, I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I've eaten my honey with my honeycomb. Notice the verbs are past tense here, and almost as if looking forward to this time when he will be united with the one that he loves, and she will be with him, and they will have this relationship with one another, and there will be no interruptions. That he almost looks back and says, look, I've had the good with the bad. You know, I've had it both ways. And I look forward to a time when my joy will not need the sorrow. And I will not taste of the wine along with my milk. And I think that we understand a lot of these references. We know that our Lord is sweeter than honey and the honeycomb, that that myrrh certainly signifies the sorrow, that he seems to talk about the fact that right now it will be in the past one day when they are together, that this will all be in the past. You think about, I've thought a lot about, in heaven, what you will remember of the past. Will we remember the sorrows because there will be no more tears? Will we remember the sadnesses? Will we we will not have those two things mixed together? He looks forward to a day when the garden will provide them with that ability to exclude those other things. We understand that our Lord is the taste that we strive for, that the Lord is good. Blessed is a man who trusts in him. This is just signifying that we understand this language. We talk about these things. We read these scriptures and we sing that the law of the Lord is sweeter than even honey in the honeycomb. And so we talk about this. And then he ends his thoughts by saying, if the Lord alone satisfies, then don't we want everybody else to participate in that? And that's really what he's saying. He's saying, you're not going to enjoy the intimacy of the marriage necessarily, but you want to invite everyone to come and enjoy and celebrate and enjoy the bliss and the joy shared in this celebration. The joy and bliss of the marriage supper of the Lord will be too good to be reserved for heaven alone. It will spill over and be offered to all who would come, to all who deserve to be there, to all who love the groom. He brings us, those who are in love with him, back with him that we may partake. What a wonderful, hopeful, glorious day. And I think these are the sentiments that have been discussed in these last verses. No wonder the shepherd was excited and thrilled at the thought of sharing this intimate place outside and secluded from the world with this one that he loves. So surely what we have seen in this last chapter is that the king is struck by her outward beauty and adorning, and that the shepherd is struck by her faithfulness, her purity, and the hope of a pure love demonstrated. And so what invitations do we accept? I mean, that's really what the last chapter was about, that she was being offered several different types of invitations, and she would have to decide what she would want to do. Now, I believe at this point, I believe, and remember, this is a song, so we're not talking about chronological things, so we're not hopping all over the place. The king is writing a song about his experience with a young woman who may be the only young woman who ever said no to him, who ever said, I love something more than what this palace can offer me. That would have been a very unusual young woman. And so I think now she begins talking again to the women of the palace. And the reason I say that is because the two stanzas of verses that are in between her thoughts are attributed to women. And their language is the same as the women of the palace. And you see those verses in orange on your sheets. They are verse 9, and then again, the first verse of chapter 6. And so I think she's turning again to these Shulamites, to these women of the palace, and she's on fire. She's just thought about this time. It's like us thinking about being in heaven, and we get so excited that it's impossible for us not to share Christ with others. And so it's almost uncontrollable in her longings to tell of him. And we see her here give this account in the form of a dream in which she seems to be at the lowest of lows, when she feels like she might have lost him. And so the dream is about her feeling like, oh no, now I've lost him. Now he's out of my life. Now what am I going to do? And the ones who lived for Solomon and the love and the pomp and the glory and the things that he could offer don't seem to really understand this dream. And they interject in verse 9, like I said, what is your beloved more than another beloved? Oh, you fairest among women. She goes into the long description about her dream. And so after they ask her that, she'll then talk about, she will begin to describe him. And so after they ask her who he is, then she really lets loose and she tells him how glorious she is. And so in this part of the text, she gives these testimonies in three parts: a dream, She gives a vivid description of her beloved, and then she departs from them, and she'll give her parting words. So after remembering in just the previous chapter the commitment made with her beloved in a time past, she's now going to begin to try to make these women understand about how her life would be without him. It's interesting to think about this dream, I think. It is an interesting account. It could be that this young woman didn't feel that she had adequately answered her beloved, that the beloved had asked her to leave the palace, and that time and time again, perhaps day after day, month after month, or maybe even year after year, she had stayed in the palace and reserved her ability to leave. It could be that her position in the palace, making this choice between these two men, was really causing her a dilemma, and that she is weighing out the commitment and what commitment she will make. And the fact that she has not been committed as she needs to be. Perhaps she's awakening to that now as she begins to talk about this dream. Perhaps she understands that she could lose him forever, and that he would never be her husband unless she gets on to answering his calls. And it could be as much about her answering them as her answering herself. Perhaps she's somewhat surprised by herself as this dream awakens her. But at first, she seems to be excited by the voice of her beloved in the dream. She hears his voice. He's knocking. Few things are worse than arriving after a long pursuit and finding nobody there. And he needs her to answer. So let's look at this text. As this chapter begins, she says, I sleep, but my heart is awake. Let me move this. Hold on. It is the voice of my beloved, and he knocks, saying, open for me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is covered with dew, and my locks with the drops of the night. So she begins telling about this dream as he passionately pleads for her now to open the door. He calls her his sister, his love, his dove, his perfect one. There were not enough ways to describe her for him. There were just not enough words to express the love that filled his heart for her. The terms of endearment just gushed from the recesses of his heart. He is calling her. This is a voice that she's longed to hear, perhaps for months, maybe even a year or 2 years. She's longed to hear his voice again, and now she hears it in this dream. She was his sister, appropriate and tender, one he naturally cared for most, one he would honor and want the best for. She was his love, the one he was passionate about. The difference between a brother and a sister and a husband and a wife. He adored her. He was not about to settle at a sister when it came to this relationship with her. He would take it one step further and talk of his love for her. She was his dove in beauty, and the fact that that one of the commentators says the other thing about a dove is it always returns to its nest, that it may go out and leave, but it will return back to the one that it loves. It is taken away and returns home. No sooner had she heard his voice than she would soar over the obstacles and make her way to him, was his thought process. She was his perfect one. And we talked about this last week. Undefiled, pure, and spotless, much as this love indicated. A love that was blind of the spots and the blemishes. So remember that Solomon notes for us that there are some things that are just too wonderful and too high to understand. And one of them is a way with a man with a maid. And you would think that a man in a harem of 1,000 women or so, that he would have learned something about this subject, but it's not he who understands this very thing. It is this shepherd. This shepherd seems to understand the real secret of a man with a woman. He respected her. He knew her to be pure and undefiled. And so he calls with a voice of passion, but also with a voice of plea for purity. He was wet, we are told. It says that he was covered with dew. He was tired. It was late. He may have come a long way over a lot of mountains. Remember, he's skipping on the mountains and come a long way for her. He had longed to come in out of the cold and the damp and the darkness and be warmed and be dry. He asked her now to provide him with the security of her love, to give him comfort and assurance, to make sure that she returned that love. He asked her to allow him the knowledge that he was safe in her love and that she would not leave him. He was weary, tired, and spent. And he had expressed every form of love. I think about our Jesus who has expectations of us. I just think that that's true. I think he expects us. We know that over and over again in the scriptures, we are commanded to love the Lord our God with all of our heart and all of our soul, with everything in us, with all of our strength. And if we look back over the Old Testament, that's seen over and over. But it is Jesus who tells the rich young ruler that it's just wonderful that he's kept the law. But that what Jesus really needs him to do is give himself up, everything about himself, to love the Lord with all of his heart and all of his soul and all of his mind, which might mean him giving up his life. And of course, that is really what is happening here. He knocked and he called and he called and he knocked. And though she seems to relay this first part of her dream with excitement and anticipation, she says, I was asleep, but I was awake and I heard his voice and it was just wonderful. And she seems, like I said, to relay this first part of her dream as if it's going to be a wonderful evening. Look at what she does. And she says, as she begins to embark upon this part of her dream filled with excuses, it kind of becomes a nightmare, doesn't it? This is what happens to us. Perhaps a sign of a conscience concern. She says, well, I've taken off my robe. And how can I put it on again? And I've washed my feet. How can I defile them? My beloved put his hand by the latch of the door and my heart yearned for him. And so it is interesting because she is so excited that she's heard his voice, but she doesn't open the door. It's a tragedy. I mean, she begins to make excuses. She can't be with him because she just simply, it's just not a good time. She doesn't bother to answer the door. And she tells these women about this. She said, I heard his voice and he was there and he had to do it. He wanted me to open the door, but I didn't because I had already put my robe on and I had already done the nightly rituals that I do to go to bed. And she doesn't bother to answer the door. She simply allows him to stand outside the locked and bolted door in the wet and the cold night. What a nightmare, she confesses this dream to these women. And she tells of her silly reasons. She's already in a relaxation mode. She has already put off her coat. She's already done her nightly ritual and routine. Okay, so nobody does this better than me. I do the exact same thing every night. I am telling you. I know that you with young children can't do this, but you will when you're old like me. So because I know when Will and Randy were little, I didn't have this, but every night I do the exact same things. I put the same amount of lotion on, I pump it the same amount of time. I do my exact same thing. And when I get into that bed, and I am finally in my bed after I put lotion on, I mean, I am really OCD. I don't want to get up again. And it really frustrates me if we've forgotten to turn the fan on. And Russ says, did we forget to turn the fan on? And I know he thinks I'm going to get up and do it. But I get this. We all get this. What happened to this young woman is her shepherd needed her and it wasn't convenient. And she was tired and she didn't feel like it. And he came at a bad time. And it wasn't a good time for her. And so she gives these silly reasons, as we do, by the way, all the time. She was ready for bed. It wasn't a convenient time for him to come knocking. You know, sometimes things are just not convenient for her, for all of us, for us. And it's much easier for us if these commitments can be done on our schedule and we can just schedule them in, right? I mean, that's a lot easier. And if we can answer when we want to answer and not answer when we don't want to answer. Her Lord wanted her to come and he wanted to be answered and he wanted to own her heart, but it was not convenient for her. And so she doesn't get up and she doesn't answer the door. And certainly I don't have to explain the analogy, surely what comes to mind for us here, right? I mean, who's at the door standing, knocking, patiently calling, knocking. And we say in either words or in actions, well, this is just not convenient. And I've done my share and this has happened to me and people don't understand. I've just gone through this or I've just done this or and besides I don't ever miss a service and I've done my washing and I've done my rituals and I've put my robe on. And I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And I've had a busy day I know what that feels like. My coat is off and I've been attending to other things, and I will answer another day. And our world will wrap up excuses for us, and they will gift wrap them, and they'll put a bow on them, and they'll put them on a little silver tray, and they'll slide them in front of you. And if you are willing, you can open them up and you can give them all the day long, if we are willing to accept that gift from the world. And so she is actually captive to her own silly excuses before she realizes it. She's the one that has she is captive to herself, and she hears her beloved put his hand on the knob. She says, and then I heard his hand on the knob and the latch of the door, and he even perhaps puts his hand near the opening of the window, from what the text seems to indicate, or he rattles the lock on the door. And the language here indicates that the beloved begins to try to force an entrance, but then he changes his mind and he walks away. You know, our shepherd does not lead us by putting a leash around our neck and pulling us. He asks us to follow him. And we follow him because we love him. And if we were to lose him, we would feel the anguish that this young woman felt. It is not forced. Nobody makes us get up and answer the call. And she immediately has remorse in her heart. Her soul faints when she hears him. One of the renderings of this in the original language is, my feelings were deeply moved for him. Do you know we can be deeply moved by Christ and all that Christ has done, and we can still offer excuses? We can be deeply grateful to Christ for what he's done for us and still not respond to the calls to service. We can get lazy about this thing. And we can, you ever know anybody that's always a taker, never a giver? You know, we can be those people. We're glad that Christ has forgiven us. We're glad that we can be forgiven of sins. We're glad that he died on the cross for us. We're certainly grateful to him for all that he's done. But we need to understand what it means when he knocks. And suddenly it dawned on her just what she had done. She had blown him off. That's what she'd done. She'd blown him off. She had blown the beloved off. He's standing at the door, and that's what she'd done. As swift as a flash, she was covered with regret, shame, and desire, which is what we do when we feel like, you know, I should have done that. I should have done that. I mean, I'm the first one to tell you, I've been there lots of times. I should have done that, and I know that. And that was something that I could have done. So she goes on to say, I rose to open for my beloved, and my hands were dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the lock. And I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and he was gone. And my heart leapt up when he spoke, and I sought him, but I could not find him. And I called him, and he gave no answer. And the watchmen who went about the city found me, and they struck me, and they wounded me. And the keepers of the walls took my veil away from me. And so now she's fully awake in the dream, I think. And she begins to understand the ramifications of her actions. You know, what would we do if we lost him? And so there's going to be times when we are weary and when we are tired, and we may not answer a call in the sense that we want to, or we may not obey with the consistency that we want. But the first thing we need to realize is what we've done and what we're missing. And so she begins to think of what to do. So in verse 5, she tells us that she's beside herself at the thought of what she's done, and she's in mourning. That's what myrrh is. And he was gone. Sorrow is now full blown in her life since she has ignored him. And she tells them what she decided to do. She tells us that with hands dipped in the ointments reserved for the most precious, mournful, sorrowful times in our lives, she runs to the door now. Perhaps even dipped as a sign of regret, she opens the door with myrrh to sadness and mourning and repentance, a true repentance for the excuses and the delays and the heart's neglect of her shepherd. But she discovers that he's no longer there, and he's gone. The threshold of the door was bare, and he was nowhere to be seen. And the shepherd was nowhere to be seen, and she calls for him, and he does not answer. And there she stood with the myrrh dripping from her hands, tragedy of tragedies. And now she will have to be spent to find him. And she will have to really be diligent to find her way back to him. You know, the further away we go, the more we neglect our Savior, the easier it is to neglect. And the further we drift, and the harder it is to get back. It's just as simple can be. We know this. The further we drift and the more excuses we give, the harder it is to go back. And so she tells of what she does. She will do everything she can to find him. He was, after all, the one that she loved with all of her heart and all of her strength and all of her mind. And she had told him, I'm too busy, I'm too tired. We sing, you know, we sing songs of how much we love him. And we mean that. And so you think about this dream. This is going to look a lot like the last dream as well. Her heart must have been racing like crazy. She would be forced to go out into the night and find him. Had she just gotten up out of bed and been inconvenienced a little bit, she would have fallen right into his arms. He would have been there and she would have fallen right into his arms. But now she must seek him with a great price. And so she tells these ladies that it was worth it, what it would be worth to her. She's going to make the decision that whatever it took, she was going to find him. She was going to go back and she was going to go back to him and she was going to find him again. Desperation, disappointment, dismay set in. And she's running about the garden calling out to him. And he doesn't answer. And so she tells that she dares to run out in the unprotected, unchaperoned, unguarded onto the streets of the eastern city, just like she did in the last dream. This was not for the first time. A very foolish thing to do, though. And she ends up being injured and insulted, verse 7 tells us. She doesn't come back the same woman she left. Had she just opened the door for me, she wouldn't have been wounded and scarred and hurt. Had she just opened the door for the shepherd. But now she will have the wounds and the scars of one who had left him. The watchman of the city, probably making assumptions about her character due to the time that she was roaming about and where she was, took them into her hands to strike her and insult her, and they remove her veil, which is a thing that probably indicates that they thought she was somebody that she wasn't. They probably assumed that she was a woman of harlotry or something like that. You know, it's interesting when we leave our Lord and we don't answer to his calls, the world does make assumptions about who it is that we are, and we need to be careful about that. What a dream. She had lost the opportunity to answer the call of the one that she had been waiting to hear his voice. And that's where we find ourselves when we don't answer. And she's in a terrible fix. A terrible fix. Her foolish behavior had led her to have her character, her testimony, and her virtue questioned. And in some ways, rightfully questioned. And the world will ravish those who are owned by it. At that point, she was alone in the world. And I will tell you, the world is not kind to us. Without her shepherd, her very character was compromised. And so she's told her story, her dream, her nightmare. And she tells them how she regrets the foolhardiness of her actions in this dream, how real this dream seems, and the memory of it lingered on. And she learned a painful lesson that had left lasting impressions on her heart. And she's almost finished telling this dream. But before she finishes, she makes a plea for these women. And she says, I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, tell him I am lovesick. And then they say, well, what is your beloved more than any other? O fairest among women, what is your beloved more than another beloved, that you so charge us? All right, so the Shulamite turns to the court women with this urgent plea after she's told him this dream and how she was not successful in finding him and how she now had been compromised in this world without her shepherd. and that tragedy really had set in because she was without him. She turns to these women of the court and she says, "Oh, daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, will you tell him that I am lovesick for him?" And so it's an interesting plea. This is an interesting part of the passage, I think. So after all, he had not left her in anger. She had hoped that he would return and that there was still time to let him know that she was in love with him, to answer the door, not like in the dream. So she says, "Help me find him." And maybe she thought that they could help him, or maybe she thought that they had some control, or that they could send someone to find him. But the dream had quickened afresh in her soul this sense and need for her beloved that she wanted to draw. And so she begins to really make a cry for him. And she asked these women, how in the world could she hope for these women to find him? You know, you think about this. How in the world would these worldly women know who he was? These women did not know her beloved. They could not convey her heart's cry to him. You know, love's not always logical. And so I think it's just part of her yearning. And she soon discovered that, expecting these women who thought so highly of all the worlds and all the attractions to understand and appreciate her dilemma, it was like casting the pearl before the swine, wasn't it? It was useless for her to ask these women to help her find him, or to even hope that they would relay a message to him, or if they were to find him. So the mockery she receives proves that these women were still quite unimpressed with her beloved or her heart's affection for him. They reply sarcastically, "What is your beloved anyway, more than anybody else? I mean, what in the world? He's a shepherd. How great can he be?" I mean, really, how great can he be? And why would we tell him those things? And if they don't know him, they could not appreciate him, and they could not understand such a love as filled the soul of the Shulamite. And I really do feel this way sometimes when it comes to Jesus Christ. I think this is our experience with the world, that this is just, there's just no way to explain the commitment and the service that we have in our Savior in our lives to those who do not know and appreciate him. There is absolutely, we struggle to convey what it is that he does for us when someone doesn't know him. When we begin a Bible study, you know, it's almost hard to know where to begin, because to explain who you are to someone or what benefits you have, it's next to impossible. So how would these women ever begin to understand? They didn't understand him or her. And so you think about this, and I think that, do you ever study, like I said, the words of wisdom with those who seem to understand, don't understand what you tell them? It's happened to me a lot. And I have taught classes and had discussions like this, very much like this, where I walk away and think, there's just no grasp at all. What would I do without Jesus? That's really the light we shine, right? Isn't that our light? Explaining to people? What would my life be if I did not open that door? And yet, to my friends who are thrilled with the world, and I have some of those, who see the value of beauty and popularity and power and in wealth, in entertainment and in leisure, you know, would think I was crazy to do the things that I do and spend my time doing the things I do. It's hard for me to explain my service and my peace and my glory and my confidence. It's hard to explain that because they cannot see. They can't see it. These women had no idea how to visualize this young man. They couldn't see it. They didn't know the shepherd. We sing, "Do you know my Jesus? Do you know he cares?" Remember, Jesus, our shepherd, warned us of those who had ears and couldn't hear, and eyes that couldn't see. She's explaining to women who they did not have the capacity to understand, to hear, and to see. And so she begins again, and she thinks, "You want to know how special he is?" She's told him a dream about losing him, and now she says, Okay, let me just describe him. Let's just not even talk about a dream and me losing him. Let me just describe him. Do you ever sing "You Are Beautiful Beyond Description"? Too marvelous for words, too wonderful for comprehension. You sing that song? That's what she's about to do. She is going to sing a song about a wonderful man, and boy, is he ever. She is going to sing. They had asked her, who is he? And she's going to tell them. Let's look at what she says. She says, well, I'll tell you about him. She says, my beloved is white and ruddy, chief among 10,000. By the way, this is the fairest of 10,000. That is what this word means. He is the best of 10,000. His head is like the finest gold. His locks are wavy and black as a raven. His eyes are like the doves by rivers of waters, washed with milk and fitly set. His cheeks are like beds of spices, banks of scented herbs. His lips are lilies, dripping liquid myrrh. His hands are rods of gold set in beryl. His body is carved ivory, inlaid with sapphires. His legs are pillows of marble set on bases of fine gold. His countenance is like Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. His mouth his mouth is most sweet. Yes, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. Wow. You want to know who he is? I will give you a picture of him. Now, I looked for really handsome boys, and I found two that I thought were quite striking. I think he's very handsome. So, do you? Okay, good. All right, good. I'm not so far off. See, ladies, even at 60, I think I was about 58 when I did these. So, but anyway, he's quite handsome. Oh my goodness. These women want to know who he is. How is he fairer than the others? She says, okay, ladies, hang on. Right? Get ready. She should have just shouted out, well done, Creator. You have really done well. She stands amazed at this magnificent creature. She had a keeper, didn't she? Boy, I mean, Solomon, I'm sorry, but in my dream, he was really handsome, actually. But emotion stirred deeply within this woman as she describes this young man. She was cut off from him temporarily, perhaps, but the image that she had of him was so deeply embedded in her heart that she could see him no matter where he was. She thinks first of his purity. He is something else, isn't he? He's handsome. He is the fairest of 10,000s. He's the best of the best. Like I said, we sing this song, you are beautiful beyond description, too marvelous for words, too wonderful for comprehension, with like nothing ever seen or heard. How can we not understand the Song of Solomon? All right, so she starts at his head. So here we go, ladies. Get ready for a trip. Here we go. So she thinks first of his purity, right? He's white and ruddy, pure and holy and wonderful, and at the same time healthy and alive with the life and the sun and the elements that were meant to show on his face. I don't know if you girls know who Robert Redford is, but he didn't. I mean it, Judy, don't you think? I mean, I used to think he was so handsome. He's a star. I said, or Brad Pitt, because I figured y'all would know him, right? Brad Pitt. I know who he is. Yeah. I don't know many stars anymore, so I had to go back. But anyway, it's that kind of coloring, you know, that kind of ruggedness. But, you know, he's ruddy, but it's not like, you know, a sunburn red. I mean, he's just got it, man. He's the symbol of handsome and healthiness. Huh? Oh, did somebody say? What'd you say? No. I mean, that's not fair to Esau. I don't know. Esau could have been, but you're right. I think of Esau as redheaded and kind of red. Yeah. But can be handsome. But anyway, this was a symbol of handsome and healthiness at its best. I mean, this guy had it. These women have asked, who is he? The sun had treated him very well, is what she's saying. Remember, it had treated her well. But it seems to be doing the same thing for him. I mean, these were two good-looking shepherd and shepherdess. I can tell you that. All right. So these would have been some pretty children. I feel like they had children later. I bet they were really pretty. His position was one above all others. He was thousands of others. In fact, tens of thousands of others. He was the fairest of 10,000 to my soul, she says. And we say that too. We certainly do love the one that is the fairest of all the tens of thousands. That is a Hebrew expression. Remember when David, the song that the women sang? Are we okay? Okay. And so, you remember when the song that David did not kill thousands as Saul did, but he killed 10,000s, we are told. This was no ordinary young man. He was the chiefest of all the young men. Perhaps she too sang these words. It was easy to hear. It would be easy to hear songs about this one. I can tell you that. So she's taken with this person too. It wasn't just his goodness that, she lovingly talks about his person, from head to hands, to feet, to lips, to legs, cheeks, countenance. Everything's mentioned in this song. 10 things are told about him. His head was of finest gold. His locks were wavy and black as raven. She describes his hair. Though gold be the image, a head of sovereignty it was. King Solomon's crown would never outshine the glory of this man. It's certainly here a reference to the different type of royalty, one that perhaps couldn't be understood by these women due to the lack of the physical crown. But she says he was glorious. It's almost as if she depicts him like some of the old icons, the old Russian icons depict all of the people with the gold around their heads, that there is a inner goodness about these people, that there is a heavenly spiritual goodness about them, that they are royal and glorious. And so she tells them, in addition, that he had this beautiful, wavy, vibrant, manly head of hair. He was strong, and it was apparent in his hair. He was in the prime of his life. No hairs were missing. This young man had a full head of hair. A young man with all the force of his power and strength. There were no worn out hairs and no gray hairs and no white hairs. I mean, this was a guy who had a sheen around his beautiful wavy locks. See the guy in the picture? He's pretty good representation, I believe. Okay, his eyes are like doves by the rivers of waters, washed with milk and fitly set. His sight, I believe, is partly discussed based off of the ones that I've read that understand the Hebrew, like the doves by the channels of the water, bathing in the milk, set as gems in a ring. They were lovely shaped eyes. Eyes, the window to the soul. He's already commented on her eyes several times. Why not comment on his? Protection, that he watched over her, eyes that would guard, drink in the beauty of both the world and herself, and just the right distance apart. They're just the right distance. They're not wonky, they're not crossed, they're not too close together, they're not too far apart. I mean, we've all seen these things, and not in him. And he is just remarkable already, and we're just at his eyes. His cheeks are like a bed of spices, banks of scented herbs. His lips are lilies dripping liquid myrrh. To be near him is to breathe the fragrance of balsam, to be wrapped up in the perfume and spices. To be near him is to be enfolded in such sweetness as it takes your breath away. And yes, to carry away something of that sweetness with her. She could imagine it now. His lips, much as he had noted hers, were both gorgeous and lovely and uttered wonderful words. Most commentators in word studies assume that this had more to do with his words than his kisses, though I'm sure they were also wonderful. But his words made her spirit soar, words that thrilled her and gave her chills, and easily be brought on, that they could easily be brought on by the memories of him. This was a new love, and there was I'm sure that this brought excitement to her, and her heart still skipped beats, thinking of him. Oh, sorry, I haven't finished. We're just at his hands and arms. Arms is actually this word here. When it says his hands are rods of gold, the Hebrew word here is yad, which is apparently indicates actually arms, is more likely the correct interpretation. He is skilled. He had arms that were not only useful in all ways, but they were beautiful. And they were wonderfully valuable for all things, arms that could hold and protect and build and caress and provide. We all know those types of arms. And whatever she could do, possibly require could be given by arms such as these. These were wonderful arms. And they were both made of substance, but also of beauty. The beryl is like a emerald or a precious gem. And then we move on to his substance. She tells us of his body or his belly, or more likely his heart is what this indicates. It is bright or polished as ivory, overlaid sapphires in the form of substance. Her beloved was glorious to behold. His heart was as pure as ivory. However, ivory could not fitly describe the true value of this precious heart. And so she talks about the sapphire. The very beautiful materials surrounding these women that would have been so impressive to them are actually encompassed within his heart. His very core was made of these things that these women so admired and had, glittering all around them. And she describes him as having a heart that was made of such things, that she was not in need of wearing such jewels. After all, her beloved possessed such richness in the depths of his being. And it's not that the world does not know value. You think about that. It's not that they don't understand what is valuable. They have just misplaced value. I've certainly felt this way my whole life. I've known and been close to a lot of people, a lot of folks who possess a lot of expensive and beautiful things. Folks that are educated and in prestigious positions, certainly when we or what they would think were anyway, when we worked in Washington. But the folks that I will tell you are the most impressive people to me in my lifetime, the people that have meant the most to me, that I have the deepest affections for, that have actually molded me and guided me the most, are not those who are valued in those measurements. It is not that. It is those that I believe are those who have loved the greatest and served the greatest and understood the words of God the greatest. They had the hearts made of ivory and precious stones, not those who owned those things, but those who possessed them within their hearts, that understood what true beauty looked like, that didn't value themselves by the possessions that they had or the education that they had or the position. Those who have the greatest heritage left behind are those who possess such a heart, such a belly, such a body. The things that the palace were so impressed with were found within the shepherd, true and sure. His legs are pillars of marble set on the basis of fine gold. His countenance is like Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. You should see him stand, she says. He is unwavering. He is secure. He is strong. He is unmovable. I mean, this is the strength. His physical legs were amazing. They were fun to look at. And in addition, important for her to note to us that they were also part of his strength, right? The cedars of Lebanon had nothing on him. You think about this. Who could possibly have cared about the alabaster and cedar pillars and columns surrounding her in that palace when she knew the shepherd and his legs? Cedars that were moved across countries to enhance the most royal household in the world due to their majesty, their stateliness, and their beauty did not hold a light to this young man's legs. It is amazing, this description of him. And now she says his mouth is most sweet. Yes, it is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. And so she finishes by trying once more to explain what it is that she has in this wonderful young man and that she cannot obtain in the palace and the king. She finally again remembers his words and that there is no ointment, no perfume, no honey, jam, or jewel that can provide the sweetness of his words and the kisses that he provides to her. He is altogether lovely. He is everything. There is no spot. He is lovely, 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 described in all ways. There was nothing she could say about him that was not lovely. And he was her friend. That's the way she ends this description of him. He is her friend. This is a form of friendship that had no sexual overtures by language. He was her greatest companion, her one that she could share not just her physical self with, but her emotional self with and her heart's desire. He was more to her and she to him than a king who had many young women at his bidding as he desired could ever imagine. For this was not a physical relationship, it was a friendship. And we sing, "What a friend I have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer." Have we trials and temptation? Is there trouble everywhere? We should never be discouraged. We've got a friend. Do thy friends despise, forsake thee? Take thee to the Lord in prayer. In his arms he'll take and shield thee. Thou wilt find a solace there. These are the songs that we sing. These are the words we sing that are an almost exact replica of this song and what this young woman communicated to this king who had no way to understand this. He is our friend. He would not just be interested in her when he was physically stirred, as Solomon would be, possibly 35, 40 evenings out of his entire life, but he would be her friend in all times, in all days, in all years, and in all things. Well, where has your beloved gone? Okay, I'll start here next week. We'll start right here next week because it's 8 o'clock and I've gone for an hour. So chapter 1, verse 6, which really is a follow-on from chapter 5. It really should not go with chapter 6, and we'll see that next week, but we'll start here. And so this is their answer to him and what it is that she answers back. Actually, I'm just going to finish it real quick. Where is your beloved gone, O fairest among women? Where has your beloved turned aside that we may seek him for you? And if you will view the text as 3 people, and you will accept or at least entertain the notion that this young lady is away from this beloved and she's isolated with the enemy as such, and that her beloved is absent, then this is a powerful part of the text. The Shulamite finds herself alone in a world, a cold, cruel, hostile, and evil world, surrounded by temptation, and her beloved was nowhere near. And in this closing section, we note the response of those who listened to the Shulamite. The daughters of Jerusalem, the court of Solomon, were astonished at the outpouring of this love, this eloquent, poetic testimony of the shepherd. And they immediately responded, and they questioned this young woman. And it appears that they would like to know more about the beloved. She has stirred something within them. And it seems from the language that they're actually almost sincere. Well, tell us more. She's caught their attention. She's been able to stir something within them. And we pray that when we tell others about who it is that we love and about our Christ, that they are moved and deeply stirred so that they ask us more. They indicated that they would jointly look for him, that they would go on an expedition to find them. But the Shulamite seems to sense something here. And so she responds and says, my beloved has gone to his garden, to the beds of spices, to feed his flock in the gardens and to gather lilies. I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. He feeds his flock among the lilies. The Shulamite seems to have some sort of insight here, and she discerns that they may not be serious, that they may not really want to know her beloved, that they have opportunities to know him if she were to go and find him. And so she just seems to realize this. And so she answers by saying, giving a vague and elusive answer, I know where he is. That's really what she says to them. My beloved has gone to his garden. I know where he is. I am my beloved and he is mine. In other words, my beloved is in his rightful place. He is where he belongs. He is doing the things that are a delight to his heart. He is engaged in the most beautiful occupation. He is busy feeding his flocks. And I know where he is. And I know how to find him. And that is what is important. And that is all that mattered. And she would no more entertain these women at the expense of this wonderful man. She was done. And at times, it would be just the shepherd who would fill her heart. Lonely in a palace, but not alone. She knew exactly where he was and where she could find him. And that is how we are with our Lord. We know where he is. He's busy. In fact, he's told us he's gone to prepare a place for us. He's preparing a wedding feast where we will sit at his table. He is going to come back, I believe, with the delegations of the risen before us and come and get us. And that is, we know where he is. We know how to find him. We know how to answer the door. Okay, I'm going to turn off the recording and we will open it up for any discussion.